4 simple ingredients. That's all it takes to make one of the greatest food staples of our planet. Flour, water, salt, and yeast. The humble loaf is a way to connect to our past. For when we eat the foods our ancestors ate, we share in their experience. The sounds of a crackling crust, the opening of a fresh loaf. We marvel at the beauty together, enchanted by the fruit of our labor. Our simple loaf of bread. Hello everybody, and welcome to this very special episode where we are going to be making bread. There's a period a few years ago when I went on this kick trying to cook like our ancestors as much as possible. I did a lot of fermentation, cooking over fire, and I was determined to make a loaf of sourdough bread, basically bread from a natural starter. I had tried for about a year with a lot of failure, and it really wasn't until I got this book, Ken Forkish's Flour, Water, Salt, and Yeast, that I was finally successful. I can't recommend this book enough to people who are just starting off baking, or even if you are a seasoned baker. There's tons of great ideas and recipes as well as techniques in there. I love this book. I have a link down in the description in case you're interested in buying it. And while bread may be a few simple ingredients, it does require a bit of kitchen hardware. Some things that are going to be very important to have are going to be a scale, a thermometer, a proving basket, a bench scraper, a 12-quart food-safe container, a 6-quart food-safe container, and a Dutch oven. Now, the one main ingredient that bread will need that's not listed here is time. It takes a long time for the fermentation process to properly break down the wheat kernel. I'm going to be using my sourdough starter. If you don't have one, hopefully you can get one from a friend or a neighbor, but if not, I'll show you in a later video how to make one. Now, the other thing that bread making will reward is an acute attention to detail. That is why we have thermometers and scales, and parts of this recipe are going to be very specific, and I promise following them is a key component to a successful bread loaf. In that vein, the first step you should take before you actually reawaken your starter is you should weigh this 6-quart fermentation vessel. I've done it before in the past without the lid, and it was 424 grams. I'll show you why in just a minute, but it's important to know the weight of just the vessel before anything's added. Now, if you are like me and you're not making bread every other day, you're going to have to reawaken your starter from its little nap in the fridge. So let me show you how I did that yesterday morning. Thanks, Future Paul. Okay, so what I have here are a handful of things. We'll get into it in a moment. Most importantly though, I have my starter. It's 200 grams. I took it out of my fridge and I want it to get up to room temperature. That takes about an hour. Now to this, I'm going to add 400 grams of water at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Add that to our starter and then just kind of give it a little mix. Great, and then once you get it mixed, now we're gonna add our flour. We're gonna do 400 grams of all-purpose flour, 400, perfect. Now we're gonna do 100 grams of whole wheat flour. So that's 500 grams in total of flour, and now we're just gonna mix everything. And as you're mixing, you're looking for like a shaggy consistency we're starting to get here. This is about the consistency that we're looking for though. Go ahead and cover it, and we'll see it first thing tomorrow morning. I'm gonna show you guys how to feed your starter on the day that you're going to actually begin to make the loaves. So we have our starter that we've activated yesterday, And of course, the most important thing for today is we make sure that we have weighed this container because now we need to remove all but 100 grams of the starter inside of this. And as you can see, it's very active, very bubbly, it looks great. Take my scale, turn it on. It's best when you're working with the starter and with dough at this stage to have wet hands. So I'm looking for 100 grams. I know that this container weighs 424 grams. So I'm just gonna discard the rest. So I have my 100 grams of starter ready to be fed. Well, we're gonna feed it. We're gonna feed it the same way we did yesterday, 400 grams of water at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 500 grams of flour in total, 400 all-purpose, 100 whole wheat. You don't have to mix it too thoroughly, just till about there. I'm just gonna cover this and then wait 6 to 8 hours where we'll start to make the final dough. So our starter now has been going for about 6.5 hours. It's active, it's about where we want it. So about 30 minutes before I actually start my bulk fermentation process, I need to auto-lease the rest of the flour that we're gonna be using in addition to the starter. So there actually is a thunderstorm coming in, approaching the house, but bread waits for no one, not even if you're trying to shoot a video about bread in a thunderstorm. So we're just gonna go straight into it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to weigh out 800 grams of flour. Now I'm going to do a combination of all-purpose flour and some whole wheat flour and some rye flour. I got these flours from Barton Springs Mill. They're by where I live in Austin, Texas. They source all of their wheat from within 200 miles of us. They are supporting local farmers. They do a great job. I have a link to their website as well down in the description. So first we're gonna add the all-purpose flour. I'm looking for 550 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm going to do about 125 grams of rye flour. And then we're gonna do the rest 150 of this whole wheat. It's a Yacora Rojo from Barton Springs Mill. It's a nice whole wheat flour that's great for breads. So 150 of this, and then that will give us that magic 800 number. Great. Exactly at 800. Kind of go ahead and give this a little mix. Next, I need about 640 grams of water at about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So kind of like we did with the starter earlier, we don't need to really spend a ton of time mixing all this stuff together. It is going to kind of ease into itself as it gets more comfortable with itself. That makes sense, I guess. I'm just going to, got my doughy hands. I'm gonna cover this and set it aside and let it sit for about 20 to 30 minutes. I'll see you back then. Auto leasing is complete. It's time to start adding all of our active ingredients into the mix. And you might be able to hear, but there's a thunderstorm above us. Henry's just a little freaked out, the dog, so he may be wandering around. Dogs don't like thunderstorms. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 21 grams of fine sea salt to the mix. I have another scale here that's a little more sensitive than this other one, so I'm going to use it. So I'm looking for 21 grams. Look at that, perfect. Okay, I'm going to add my salt. Next, I'm going to add 1.75 grams of dry activated yeast. So this is a kind of a hybrid loaf. We are going to be using the sourdough starter, but we are going to be using just ever so small amount of this instant yeast to kind of help the fermentation process along. Perfect. As you can see, it's just a tiny little bit of yeast, and I like to try and sprinkle it through. Great. Now, when we're working in this stage, a wet hand is going to be the best. So I'm just gonna fold fold the mixture kind of in on itself. And now we're gonna add our sourdough starter. We're gonna get a little vessel, this measuring cup, and put a little bit of water in the bottom of it. I'm gonna take the starter. I'm looking for 360 grams of starter. And it's perfect. You guys are my lucky charm. Try and get the excess water off of it. If you can, great. And then just spread it out over the top. Set this to the side. We're gonna save 300 grams of that sourdough starter, put it back into the fridge, and that'll live there for about a month. You just need to activate it again sometime over the next month. Name of the game here, wet hand. So I'm going to take this, and this is gonna be kind of this process that's gonna take about 5 minutes or so. This is really just the most work that you do when it comes to making this bread recipe. But I'm gonna take it and pull it away from me, drop it down, take it, pulled away, drop it down, take it, pulled away, drop down. I wanna do that about 5 times. Great. And then I'm gonna get a little claw pincher method going and pinch through about 5 or 6 times. You can kind of feel the grains of the salt and then reform it back into a ball. Great. And then just keep going. We want to do this until it's all incorporated. So this is going to take the better part of 5 to 10 minutes. Everything looks incorporated, looks fantastic. I'm gonna put the lid on top of it, and we're gonna bulk ferment for 5 hours. So we're gonna come back pretty much every 30 minutes from now on for the next, not forever, but for the next 2.5 hours, and we're gonna fold it. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Those folds are gonna be really important for the structure of the bread. I'll show you how to do that. You wanna do that in the first 2.5 hours though. The last 2.5 hours of bulk fermentation, you don't wanna touch it. So we'll come back in about 30 minutes, do a couple of folds. Okay, it's time to do our first turn. So we're just gonna access the dough. Wet hand again. And very similar to what we were doing earlier, kind of pick it up and drop it, pick it up, drop it. You can do this 5 times. Great. And as best that you can, it's kind of hard when it's at this stage. You just kind of want to lift it up and turn it over. Perfect. We'll do that 2 more times over the next hour, and then we'll let it bulk ferment for 5 hours. We'll see you when it comes back. Welcome to tonight. We've been bulk fermenting our dough for about 5 hours. We've gotten a lot of activity going on. I love seeing all these air pockets in there. So now it's time to shape our loaves. We're gonna be using these 2 proving baskets. We have 2 loaves of bread in here. So let's dive right in. First, we need to prep the surface with some flour. Before we were using water for our hands. Now for this stage, we're gonna use flour. Go ahead and put some dough, go ahead and put some flour on the outside around the edges. And kind of work your hand down along the side and help it release We're trying to preserve the air bubbles inside of the dough. And then I just like to let it flop right out onto the surface. This is where our bench scraper is going to come in handy. Kind of find the middle line and dust it with flour. And then just with authority, cut into it. Now we're going to have our 2 loaves here. And so we'll shape one at a time. The way that we're going to shape it is just grab one edge, fold it into the center. Grab one edge, fold it into the center. Kind of a gentle touch here, but a motivated one. Fold it over. We'll let this one sit to the side as we do the other one. Where it hasn't touched too much flour, it is a little sticky, which is good. The wetter the dough, the more flavorful it will be. Great. Now I want a less floured surface here, because now we're going to be adding tension to these loaves, and that's going to help with the oven spring. That's going to help with the shape inside. And to do that, I'm just pulling it down, rotate it 90 degrees, pull it down, rotate it 90 degrees, pull it down. Oh, there we go. 90 degrees, great. And you can feel the tension building in this dough here. Now for our second loaf, pull it. Last time, and there's that tension. Great. And then dust these with some flour. Our 2 loaves are ready for their long, cold nap. We're going to be putting them in the fridge overnight to prove for about 12 to 14 hours. And you want them covered. So these are some pretty large plastic bags. So we got our 2 loaves, we got them covered. We're just gonna store them into the refrigerator for about 12 to 14 hours and we'll bake tomorrow morning. I'll see you there. Good morning, it's day 3 in our long march to bread. We're finally ready to begin baking. About an hour ago, I preheated the oven to 475 degrees Fahrenheit and I put both of my cast iron Dutch ovens into the oven when it started to preheat. We're preheating both the oven and the Dutch ovens. So I normally like to give that an hour to completely preheat. If you think of the Dutch oven, it's kind of an oven within an oven. It's going to encapsulate all the steam that the bread is naturally releasing, and that's going to help form that amazing crust that we're looking for. So let's go ahead and bring the loaves right out of the fridge. So I just pulled the loaves out. Let's take a look at how they're coming along. To test if they're done proving, you take a floured finger and you poke it, and it should have some resistance but not come all the way back. I had already kind of done that a little bit on this guy before we started filming. So we know that they're ready to go into the oven. Next step is just safety. Make sure that you have some nice oven mitts. These Dutch ovens are going to be ripping hot, so you want to be extra careful during this stage. And you're going to need to move pretty quickly, so I'm going to go ahead and bring you a little bit closer so you can see it coming in. Just kind of let it fall into your hand, like so, and then gently place it in. You can hear that sear. Just be careful not to touch the sides. Cover it up, put it back in the oven. repeat the process. Just let it fall into your hand. Plop it in. And I don't score these. You can if you'd like to. That's marking up the top to kind of make some lines. It'll naturally release. We'll cook covered at 475 for 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, let's check on our loaves. They're looking in place. Take this lid off. Whoa, yeah. That looks great. We got nice little ear forming. That's what this part is here. And number 2, some good oven spring, perfect. We'll cook for another 20 minutes. Well, it's been 20 minutes and our bread is finally done. This whole saga, let's check it out. Gloves? Oh yeah. Perfect. You're going to want to place these on a wire rack. We've worked so hard to get this crust, you don't want to put it onto a hard surface. But man, they look so good. I'm so happy with the way that they turned out. I love the little ears, and I love just the organicness of how these loaves open up when they're in the oven. I'm so happy the way that these loaves came out. This particular recipe, I call it my 20-10. It's 20% whole wheat, 10% rye at an 80% hydration. It's a very versatile loaf, great for sandwiches and soups. Nothing says comfort food like a fresh baked loaf of bread. It has a great aroma. Just the moment you start to smell it, you start to salivate in the back of your mouth. It's this auto response, which is so amazing. If you love simple, slow cooking, nothing beats a loaf of bread. It's 4 simple ingredients, one of which floats around in the air. It's flour, water, salt, and yeast. And those 4 ingredients can make such a complex, rich, delicious food. Just to think about that process, one cannot only imagine that there's some sort of alchemy or magic involved in making this. Something our ancestors tapped into, and something I hope you tap into. Share it with your friends and your family. I love how you make 2 loaves. You almost have to give one of these away. Please let me know how it goes and enjoy the gift of bread.